I'm here with Amy and John of Year of the Cobra to talk about their self-titled record that comes out February 28th on Prophecy Productions. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me. I've actually had the pleasure of seeing you guys perform in Toronto, so I'm really excited now to pick your brains a little bit about this upcoming new record. Once again, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for having
Yeah,
us.
thank you.
So let's talk about this self-titled record. Normally, self-titled albums play always a very special role in band's discography, and either you see them really early in the discography, like debut album, or you see them a little bit later on down the road when the band kind of wants to release a greatest hits, but they don't have the balls to do it, so they just release an album that sounds like the greatest hits, and they just self-title the album. It's not the case for one or the other for you guys. So, what motivated this album to bring that self-titled aroma into your discography?
Yeah, we obviously took a long time between records, and we were very picky in the songwriting process. And we've said it in other interviews. We finally made the record we wanted to make. So it was kind of an easy choice to go the self-titled route.
Did you have the idea for that earlier on in the process, or was once you started to see what the songs were going to be all about that you realized that title was the title that you needed in order to represent the body of work?
I mean, it kind of came after we had recorded or written the majority of the songs, that we were like, I think we should self-title it. And like John said, we spent a lot of time working on these songs. I mean, the last release was in 2019, but then of course the pandemic happened. But we really wanted to focus a lot on these songs and do a lot of the pre-production work and just really be able to kind of release exactly what we wanted to release. Where I feel like our other albums, when we listen back to it, there's like, oh, I wish we did this or I wish we did that. Like with this album, I don't feel like we have those thoughts.
Did that come from having more time to work on it?
Yeah, it did. And then also it was just a very conscious decision about doing all of the pre-production work. We did more pre-production work on this than on any of the other albums. Like, every single vocal harmony I had already down. Like we had all of our BPMs. We practiced to a click and, we really just did a lot of work on this before going into the studio to record it.
Well, the work is paying off. Because honestly, I love this record. I think I mentioned the other day on my own Facebook page that it's so nice when you listen to an album that just resonates with you, that you feel like it was written for you or by you, even though obviously it wasn't. And that takes me to my next point. I felt this to be a very personal, for me, it feels like a very personal record because I can pick any song on this album and there is something about me on this record. So whenever you listen to an album like that, it always comes from a very personal space from the artist that created it. Is this perhaps the most personal record that you guys have ever done?
I definitely think so. For me, it definitely is. Especially like in the lyric writing, I tend to write more about stories, outside stories. I mean, they're all stories that I think I can relate to and that I think other people can relate to, but I generally don't write a lot of things that are personal, that kind of just come from me. And I feel like there are some songs on this album that come from a more personal space. They're not referring to specific things or events that have happened, but just general events and general feelings of, say loneliness or just all of that. I think that for the lyric writing, it has really come from a more personal space than in any of the other records that we've done.
When you guys talk about all the work that you put in into making this record before you going even into the recording studio, at what point do you start to look at the track listing of the album and realize the importance that that could have in the overall experience that the listener will get from listening to the album from start to finish?
Yeah, it's extremely important to us. And, going back to the songwriting process, we trashed so many ideas. We were very specific in what or how we wanted this record to come across. Speaking of the pandemic, like there's probably 20 to 30 ideas that we wrote during that time that just didn't make the cut. So, like I said, it was a very conscious effort on how we put this record together and the songs that made it.
When I looked at the design of the album, in my mind, I equate the design of this record to a river. A river normally starts with a very small stream, and then as it comes down the hill, down the stream, the river eventually, as it reaches the ocean, becomes a lot wider. And this album, sonically, vocally, even lyrically to a certain extent, it feels a lot more narrow and concise as it opens. And then you guys start to become a little bit wider and wider with songs like Prayer and The Darkness as the record closes off. Was that intentional to have that sort of flow where you introduce some different nuances at the tail end of the record and not necessarily, surprising the listener at the beginning of the record?
It's interesting. I never thought about it that way. I don't think that that was our intention. We always knew, like, Prayer was probably one of the first songs that we wrote. We wrote it in 2020. It was finished all the way back then. And we knew that that was going to be the closer. That was done. Um, and then just where we were going to start, we weren't totally sure. Like, I knew why I wanted Full Sails to start because I really like that song. I didn't even want War Drop to be on the album. So it wasn't until we were completely done with it that we went, oh, okay, that one turned out better than I thought. Um, and so, after I feel like you get the first song on the album, the last song on the album, and then things start to kind of like file kind of in. And then, of course, you always have to think about side A and side B of vinyls. How do you want, how does that feel on side A? How does it feel on side B? And then if you have to think about, say, a full CD, when you listen to it without the break in the middle, how does that feel? So there's a lot of thought that goes into it for sure.
You guys nailed it, at least from my point of view. I think you guys created such a cool experience. I was traveling to Iceland when I was listening to the record. I think I listened to the album maybe 20 times. It's a 5 hour
Oh
flight.
wow.
It's a 5 hour flight plus, delays at the airports and whatever. So I got to really go into the weeds with this record. So I feel like I went probably too far into the weeds with this record, but I really connected with two songs, and I want to talk about those two songs a little bit. One is The Darkness, the other one is Prayer. I don't think I've ever heard a song, at least not recently, that had such an emotional touch with me as The Darkness had. The lyrics on that track felt like I mean, they cut like a knife, for lack of a better term. Where did the inspiration musically and lyrically for that song came from?
John wrote that song actually. He wrote the main riff of that song. The way John writes, he writes all these little riffs and then he just sends me, like 40 of them. And then I kind of go through, I mean, just a ton, right? And then I
Yeah.
go through, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And then because he writes it on guitar, I have to really think about how am I going to change it to bass? How's it going to sound on bass? What can we do with it? All of that stuff. So that one came through pretty quickly. He wrote like all three parts to it, and then I was able to kind of change it for a little bit. I changed some minor details on bass. And for me, like the music guides me, toward the lyrics. The music always comes first. However, that music feels to me is what I'm going to write about. And so, the lyrics kind of actually came pretty easily after we put the song together.
Do you always take that approach? Or do you sometimes write some, maybe not lyrics, but some words here and there that, later on down the road, maybe you'll go back to them and use them as a sense of inspiration for what develops into a track?
Yeah, John writes a lot of lyrics. And then if I get lost in something, he'll send me his book of lyrics, and then I'll go through all of his words, and that those have definitely turned into songs. Like the Battle of White Mountain, that was inspired by an actual battle that happened when we were driving through the Czech Republic. I fell in love with that country, and I was just looking at the history of it, and I saw that battle, and I thought I got to write a song about that. So sometimes it does go back and forth. Usually, I would say 95% of the time, it's all inspired by the music.
And then you have a song like Prayer, like you said, you knew immediately that this song had to close the record. Man, I've never seen a track that is described so well by the title of the track. I mean, the song feels like a prayer. It sounds like one, it feels like one. Is it difficult sometimes to have a record where you have so much fuzz on the sound, which allows you perhaps to hide sometimes a little bit behind it? And then you have a song like Prayer where there's almost no room for you to hide vocally whatsoever.
I think John could really speak about this one because he likes to play a lot of drums, like heavy drums, and I think in this song in particular, it was harder for him because he really had to like
Laid
hold
back.
back. I don't know if he's frozen, but it was something that he really thought a lot about because it's not his normal drumming. Do you remember that, John?
Sorry, you cut out for a bit.
Oh, we were talking about prayer and just how like how there's just not a lot going on. There's not a lot to hide behind. So I was saying that a lot of it had to do like with your drumming, how at the end after you recorded it, you were saying, wow, I really played like very minimal amount of
Yeah, it was purposeful. I think the vibe and uh, you know, Amy's lyrics, I thought like I just didn't want to step on. I don't know. It's beautiful and it's sad and it's emotional song. So I wanted the drums just to kind of, I don't know, be peaceful and not aggressive and just kind of be thick and big and there, not overstepping anything that was happening. So that was the goal with that one.
I think that describes the whole song. I mean, the bass really
Yeah,
plays three notes.
Yeah, there's a
know,
yeah,
little, it comes towards the tail end, but up until that point,
yeah,
the whole song is very controlled.
very like you can't hide. That
Yeah,
was
yeah, nothing.
all kind of like you're completely like bearing yourself
yeah.
with that song.
Yeah, it's definitely a great way of closing a record. Like I said, that for me felt very emotional. You guys on this album, I think more than any other record that you guys have ever released, were able to really merge well that more sludgy distortion with the more melancholic doom elements of your sound. This album really allowed them to coexist perfectly throughout. Uh, do you realize that this will perhaps be the best formula going forward to have this more of a symbiotic feeling between the two sides of your single coin?
Yeah, and going back to all the pre-production we did, that's we'll be doing that from here on out. And we also found the right producer too, Matt Bayless, who did the record. The tones he got, how hard he pushed us, but was also super encouraging. And him and Amy hit it off really well, and it really shows with her vocal takes. Like, her vocals are like no other on our other record. Like she really pushed herself, and has a lot to do with pre-production and Amy being more comfortable, but also with Matt just being so talented and pushing us. I mean, the tones he got are amazing. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. And I do think that with the songwriting, we were very purposeful with wanting to have some slower, sludgy, doomier songs with some more kind of faster, songs with kind of more rock grunge elements. So we were very specific again about the songs that we put on the album, the songs that we wrote, and what we wanted. Like we really wanted, because really I feel like with all of our albums, we start with this, and then the next album it grows just a little bit more and a little bit more. And this one really kind of just really did that expansion where we have the doomier stuff like Prayer, but then we have kind of like the more, like I don't know, hardcore ones like Demonium or 7 Years or War Drop that kind of are more kind of upbeat, but they still work together. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, they work perfectly together. And I was gonna say also, I really liked how you guys, the artwork of the album feels very simple. I mean, it's just a picture of you guys, but the artwork has such a punk attitude to it. And then when you put the record on, the punk attitude is there. Like this record has
Mm.
a lot of attitude, but the sound does not, the sound doesn't necessarily mix the attitude. So it creates this dichotomy that's so interesting to see when you put all the pieces of the puzzle together. So when you guys were looking at the artwork, considering the work that you already had, considering that was going to be called Year of the Cobra, what took you guys to that more almost punk do-it-yourself type cover?
It was pretty immediate, once we kind of got this album together and knew it was going to be self-titled. We wanted just a classic album cover, something that just looked really cool and it's going to stand the test of time. It's like I really like the crazy artwork that a lot of bands in our genre do. It's awesome. I love it, but I wanted something to stand out, and me and Amy aligned immediately on that one. We're like, yeah, it has to be just like a classic album cover.
Yeah, and we both come from a punk rock background. I mean, we're both old school punk rockers, and so it's nice because that's where we start, and then we kind of like move in slightly different directions. But that's always our home ground. So it was fun to be able to create something like that that has that feel like that punk rock kind of dirty, not so clean feel to it for the cover.
Yeah, it reminded me of The Clash. That's
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. Awesome.
That's kind of the
Awesome.
vibe. When I saw the cover, that was the first. I was like, "Wow, this is really cool!"
Yeah.
Like Clash kind of vibes. And then you put the record on, it's like, okay, the attitude is still there. It's just presented in a different sound, but the attitude is there.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a favorite song on this record that perhaps you're looking forward the most in when it comes to a live performance?
I love playing. There's two for me. I like Full Sails and Alone. Alone is really fun to play live. John's drumming is really kind of hypnotic, and you just see everybody's heads just start to bob for both songs. But they really like Alone. I feel like people really get into it, like they feel it.
Yeah. Probably the same for me. I just like the heaviness of Full Sails and has this kind of epic ending. And just Alone is again another emotional song, but just super fun to play.
When it comes to not just creating a new record, but writing a new song, is there certain pitfalls that you guys try to avoid? Maybe things that you've learned from previous albums, from previous songs, for playing live and realizing, okay, maybe this works on the record, but maybe it won't work live. Is there certain pitfalls that you guys try to avoid consciously?
I don't think so. I think we no. I mean, I think that we just try to record what we exactly what we want, and then and then try to figure out how to do it live, essentially. Right?
Yeah. And we also know sometimes like when we have songs and we record them, like we're kind of almost sometimes agree like we're probably not going to play that live, but we really like the song, you
Yeah.
know. Doesn't happen often, but there's always one or two on the record where we're like, yeah, that we're probably not going to do that live, but it really sits well on the album.
I mentioned earlier, I seen you guys perform in Toronto. I can't remember the tour that you guys were on, but I remember seeing you guys play at the Phoenix in Toronto. And it was my first time listening to the band. I had never heard of the band before. So I discovered you guys live, and the attitude that you guys had on stage, the performance that you guys put on really enticed me to then when I heard that this album was coming out to check out the record. And I
Cool.
gotta say, I feel like I've discovered more about you guys through this album than through any of the previous two, or even the live performance that I've seen you guys in. Is this album as much of a self-discovery for you as it was of a discovery for me?
I think so. I mean, I think it's just like
Yeah.
what John said. Yeah, we wanted to write our album, and we spent a lot of time making sure that we did it. So I definitely think so.
Yeah. And I think, it, it's our third record and, it's figuring out our writing style, but also not being afraid to push certain boundaries too.
I love what you guys done with this record, and that begs the question, any touring plans for 2025?
Yeah, we've got some kind of a bunch of things to announce. Couple European tours in the works and some US stuff in March and in July. So we'll have all those dates up on our socials here pretty soon.
I hope there is a Toronto dates at some point in time because, like I said, I think it's been a while since you guys played here. I really enjoyed your set, your performance, and I really enjoyed this album. This is one of those records that really defines what it means to listen to music because you
Cool.
connect with everything about the album, and you feel like you're being transported to your world for the 45 duration minutes of the record. So I absolutely love this album. I wish you guys nothing but the best with this record. And for those that have never heard of the band, go check out the album, pre-order it, buy it, like do whatever you got to do. This is an incredible. This might not be the year of the Cobra as far as the Chinese calendar is concerned. I think it's Snake, but it's definitely the year of the Cobra for you guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much for the kind words.
My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. We had a great time.